If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high-quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
A warmer from the low. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you as we're going to be joined in segment number 2 by one of our good friends, as Colby Dant. He does tremendous work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. For those that tune into my VSiN show, the Greg Peterson Experience, you see him darn near weekly there. He's going to be discussing what we can all expect this offseason, some of the characteristics of how Purdue and UConn were able to get to the national title game. Now, truth be told, I had to do this a little bit in advance because the national title game was played a little bit later on, and most of our good friends are out there in the great state of Arizona watching that game, and they were taking that in, and just very, very hard to be able to get out of the stadium and have a interview recorded by the time that this podcast uploads at midnight Pacific time. I did have to do this in a little bit in advance, but we're going to be talking with Colby about that. We are going to be diving in on the John Calipari situation with him, heading on over to Arkansas as well, his thoughts there, and we're just going to give you guys a nice primer for the offseason as we're going to recap in segment number 1 what we did see from the national title game, and this podcast from here on out, it now becomes a look forward to 2024-25 podcast, as there's no money left to be made in terms of the 2023-24 season, but that doesn't mean that we can't take a few minutes to just rejoice in what we did get this college basketball season, as it was an amazing one. Our DK network right up in the final game was able to hit, so that resulted in 85-61-1 being the record on those this year. That is the best I've ever done with those write-ups, so very happy about that. And if you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at JDUN_D1. Keep in mind, letters CM, name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline, and the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you are able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I've had a lot of people asking, is this going to be a daily podcast? Am I going to be keeping things rolling and everything like that? And the answer is absolutely yes. With 362 D1 teams out there, it takes every single day humanly possible to be taking a look at everything and what you're going to be getting moving forward. We're not going to do too much of it today just because not as many guys entered in the transfer portal. You did have Aaron Bradshaw really taking a look at all of his prospects. He's going to be entering into the transfer portal. Would not doubt if he declares for the NBA draft, but we're going to be taking a look at situations like that. I'm going to be just daily taking a look at these guys leaving the portal, signing with new schools, some guys coming back to where he came, the NBA draft ordeal as well. I really don't do a lot with regards to NBA draft betting, but it is very important to know who is in the NBA draft, who is going to be considering their options on that front as well. We're going to be taking a look at a lot of the coaching hires as well, as we did see Canisius actually on Monday have a nice little bit of a coaching hire as well, as they decided that Jim Christian, who used to be the coach over at Boston College, he is now their head coach as well. So we're going to be taking a look at all that when we get things a little bit more settled. This will be more in super duper late May, early June. That's when I'm going to start to do a lot of conference previews as well. I'm going to do one for all 32 conferences. We don't have any independents anymore, thanks to Chicago State now being able to find a home as well, but that's what you're going to be able to expect this offseason. I am going to be continuing to do this podcast every single day because my philosophy is bets that are won during the season, they're won through great preparation. They are won by just being able to take a look at everything in general. And when it comes to 362 D1 teams, you need as much time as humanly possible to be able to prepare. So I'm going to make sure to keep this podcast rolling. And for those that have been with this podcast for many, many years, this is the same philosophy that I've taken in past years. The last time I went a full day without doing a college basketball podcast, you have to go all the way back to November of 2019. So I will be with you throughout, and And right now what's with us is making money off of UConn, as they were absolutely tremendous on Monday. Let's take a look back at it, try to find some trends, and try to get to know what UConn has done a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
75-60. UConn, they win the title against Purdue. They won every single one of their 12 NCAA tournament games the last 2 seasons by 13 plus points. That is dominance that we have not seen in my opinion, like any sport. Now, were they as dominant as perhaps like those UCLA teams back when they had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Bill Walton? Maybe not, but I mean, this was just an absolute wrecking. And for Purdue, they went 1 of 7 from 3, and they only attempted 2 threes in the first half, went 0 of 5 in the second half. Would have liked to see a little bit more of an effort there. Now, Zach Edey got his 37 points, 10 rebounds, 2 blocks. He did everything humanly possible. And Braden Smith, he didn't have the world's worst game. He had 12 points, 8 assists. Outside of Smith and Edey, nobody else for Purdue had more than 5 points. They got 2 points off of their bench. Well, UConn, they were able to get 13 points off their bench, with Hassan Diarra being able to supply 9 points. The one prop that I did give out on this podcast, Alex Caravan over 4.5 rebounds, that was able to hit home as well. Unfortunately, we were unable to get the Purdue spread, but our DK Network right to pick up the under. It was a very good call. This one was able to come through as Tristan Newton, he had himself a rock-solid game. 20 points, 7 assists, 5 rebounds, and here's an important stat that not a lot of people are going to talk about. 0 turnovers, and despite Zach Edey doing all that he did for Purdue, UConn won the rebound battle. 35-28, and I threw this out on social media, and I do think that it's so true in this ordeal. UConn is just like a guy that was in a just prize fight, that was in a boxing match. Sure, they'll let you be able to get a couple blows in early, but as you're wearing down, they're just getting stronger and stronger. We saw that from UConn throughout the NCAA tournament, because for much of that game against Alabama, they weren't necessarily blowing them out, pulled away late. That game against Illinois, first 18 or so minutes, Illinois did not look bad, and then they got dump trucked. Heck, go back to that game against San Diego State. In that game against San Diego State, sure, they were up 9 at the half. That's not a bad effort, but it's not like they were completely dominating them, and then they completely dominated them in the second half as well. So I just take a look at this UConn team. Oh, so impressive. And if you're doing your way too early top 25s, what have you, and UConn is going to lose some pieces. Cam Spencer, they brought in via the transfer portal. He is going to now be out of the fold. I have to think that Donovan Clingan is going to be going to the NBA as well, but I mean, they're going to be returning so many different guys. If they're able to bring back someone in Alex Caravan, who I was very bullish on, I think that that's going to be big for them as well. And Dan Hurley has proven that he is one of the better college basketball coaches that we've got in the game today. Absolutely impressive what we saw from this UConn team. And I mean, for Purdue, in my opinion, you could say what you will about Matt Painter and not being able to get the job done in this ordeal. Yes, Purdue should have attempted more threes, but he went from having his team lose to a 16 seed all the way to the title game. He did a fine job this season. They just ran into a complete bulldozer known as UConn, and right now they are the kings of our sport. So a congratulations to UConn, a congratulations to all of you that might have had UConn in your futures, and a congratulations to all of us that bet the under in the game. So that was a good way to be able to go about it. And like I said, starting tomorrow on the podcast, we're really going to be going hot and heavy with regards to these transfer portal moves, these coaching hires, what have you. But here in the next segment, we're going to be talking with our good friend Colby Dant of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, and we're going to be talking about some of the characteristics that you might want to be looking at for teams during the offseason that might be able to have some success. I've noticed a couple commonalities with these teams that have been able to make these very good runs. Colby has as well. We're going to be talking about the fact that John Calipari is going to be heading on over to Arkansas, and we're going to be taking a look at this great game and just where we stand with it next with them right here on Tuska Soups with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Houston Family Podcast. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Tuska Soups with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Houston Family Podcast. It is great to have this man aboard as Colby Dant. He does tremendous work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. There are few that love college basketball much like myself. Colby Dant is certainly one of those people. He does a great job looking at everything from the biggest of the big games to the smallest of the small. It doesn't matter if it's a national title game or if it's Austin Peay taking on North Florida on a Thursday night out there in the middle of Nowheresville, he is going to be handicapping it. Does a great job over on the old Twitter/X at the Colby D altogether, and his main show over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is the College Experience. And Colby, it's always a great experience to get you aboard. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for having me, Greg. And I know you grind just as hard, if not harder, on college hoops. So I'm honored to be here because there's not many. Even before I didn't know you, people always said, hey, Colby, you got to check out Greg Peterson. You got to check out Greg Peterson. So I'm grateful to be here, man.
I'm glad to have you aboard too, Colby. And Colby, with this season that we just saw, very much a favorite-heavy season. We saw favorites all throughout the season, whether it was the NCAA tournament, whether it was the regular season in general. We saw a lot of favorites being able to come through. And were there any takeaways from this year that you are going to be having for next year? Because typically when it comes to college basketball, we expect a little bit more parity. We expect some of these underdogs being able to rise up, and no doubt NC State was certainly one of them, but it did feel like the top of the top teams, they very much lived up to that billing this year.
Yeah, and I'm okay with that. Look, I like a Cinderella as much as anybody. You know, I was rooting for Butlers and San Diego States and Gonzagas. But I also think that there's something cool to have in the two top teams. I know Houston might be in that mix too, had Jamal Shead not gotten injured, but I also like this. So there's something cool about this in a way of like you got the two schools with, great big men. It reminds me of like a throwback to the, early 90s or late 80s where it's like, Brad Daugherty taking on Ralph Sampson or something that, it's just old school in a way. But I like a good Cinderella. We had NC State in the Final Four. That counts kind of as a Cinderella. I know it's not a mid-major, and traditionally, I think if I had my perfect bracket, you would see a mid-major go to the Final Four. It is what it is, and I think this ball is ball, and it's great to watch, the contrast in styles in college basketball. I think, a lot of people complain about the portal, and, I get it when we do portal episodes. It is a problem, but I think college basketball is in a great spot right now. I think the sport is strong. I think it's stronger than people realize. So I think it's been a great season.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And I think what really shows how strong college basketball is we all recall like the G League Ignite. They were thinking that was going to be overtaking college basketball for the top guys. That folded a few weeks ago because with NIL coming aboard, well, now you can just go to college, be able to make that money that you'd make in the G League. And, well, quite frankly, nobody really cared about that G League Ignite, and people really care about college basketball. So I think that shows that college basketball is in a good state. As Colby Dant, we're always in a good state when he's aboard. He is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And I do think that it is interesting to dive into the portal this offseason as we're doing this. You've got 1,500 plus players out there, and most of these guys have not made up their minds. We're going to be getting that in the coming weeks and the coming months, but how much are you looking at the guys that don't go into the transfer portal? Because everyone always loves the buzz, like when Hunter Dickinson last offseason went to Kansas, that caused for a big eruption and everything like that. But what you don't see in the headlines is so-and-so not entering the transfer portal and things like that. And I think that those are some of the teams that we want to be looking at and wind it back early on during the season.
And for long-term for the year, I would say you want to have a lot of veterans returning, but yet at the same time, you don't want to be Dabo Swinney oblivious to the portal, because as you see in this game here, whether, we had the national championship and, Lance Jones, and you see him and you see, Tristan Newton and Cam Spencer. So there is a fine line of having the veterans and having, the culture, but at the same time, if you have a weakness, going out and addressing it. You just saw Musselman leave Arkansas. His whole roster was transfers. And I feel like, I know he got to 2 Elite Eights there, but it's hard to do, I feel like. You saw them struggle in the locker room, I feel like, this year too, as well as missed on some personnel. I do believe bringing back players still matters, and I know everyone's in the portal, but if you can have that balance of bringing back veterans and mixing that with your areas of weakness and attacking that, I think that's the key for college basketball teams moving forward.
And you've just explained what I've been looking at the last few years, ever since the transfer portal has really become a big thing. As we know, the originators of it were the likes of Dana Altman, who you mentioned, Eric Musselman. But I feel like if you're trying to make like hockey-style line changes, if you're bringing in 10 guys via the transfer portal, you've went too far. But these teams have been able to make the national title, like you mentioned, with UConn, bringing in Cam Spencer this year, Tristan Newton the year before on the side of Purdue, bringing in Lance Jones. I always feel like the teams that they bring in, one or two guys are like those number 3, number 4 scorers. Those are the teams that get it right in the transfer portal, not having necessarily that top flight guy in the transfer portal, but building a lot of guys that return for like a year number 2, year number 3, but then adding that 1 or 2 missing pieces, like heck, the North Carolina made the run in 2022, bringing in Brady Manick with what they had returning from the previous year. I think that that's a perfect blueprint for these teams.
100%. And I realize that there's also the other side of that coin. Your school might not have enough NIL money to keep everyone. I feel like Duke and Carolina and even Arkansas, which I know Musselman had complained about NIL and stuff, I still feel like that's a big enough brand where the money will be there to go out and get a lot of players from the smaller level. Whereas you have some schools that might not have those resources. I was just out there in Las Vegas, met up with a bunch of Arizona State people that were saying it's not Bobby Hurley's fault all the way. They just don't have the money. That's got to factor into something. I can't blame all of Bobby Hurley now, knowing that behind the scenes, I guess he doesn't have any money to go out and get players. So you got to pay attention to that too. I mean, obviously it's hard to know what schools' NIL collectives look like, but for the most part though, I do think that's a factor, is that you might not be able to keep your players there. We just saw DJ Horn at NC State. Maybe there was an element to that Arizona State wanted to keep him but didn't have the money. I don't know, but something to keep in mind as well.
Yep, that is certainly something to keep in mind, and it has been a game changer for so many of these teams, as Colby Dant, who does tremendous work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And certainly we do see it with a lot of guys. They're bolting, guys come and go, but I do feel like with regards to more of these mid-major conferences, it's a little bit more of a level playing field. You will have some teams that they certainly do put a lot of resources into it. Like, for example, Liberty out there in Conference USA, they've done an amazing job of being able to build up that program. But when it comes to some of these mid-major teams that maybe fell on tough times, what are you taking a look at for teams that might be able to have a bounce back? Because I just noticed from the betting side of things, when it comes to college basketball, year in and year out, typically the best against the spread teams are ones that might have just like stunk on ice and insert your bad conference here. And then all of a sudden they get a coaching change and they go from like sorry to relatively average to above average within that conference.
It's something to always pay attention to. I mean, you can look at plenty of examples this year of coaches that came in. I think the one that stood out the most was Danny Sprinkle at Utah State to come in year one. I thought it was a good hire, but I'd be lying if I told you I thought they would win the Mountain West regular season. There's certain things to pay attention to. The one, for some reason, when you were saying that, obviously there's 362 teams and you're sitting there while you were talking about that, the first one that popped in my head was maybe a rebound year would be Memphis, but I don't know if we can trust. They keep Penny Hardaway. You would love to think if another coach jumped in there with the amount of talent that Memphis has on their roster. And I get it. Penny Hardaway's an alum, and maybe you want to be patient because 2 years, this year was tough, but last year they probably should have beat Florida Atlantic in the opening round. And the year before that, they gave Gonzaga a tough match in the round of 32. That's one that jumps to my head always, is like, they're super talented. Can they ever put it together? But I also, SMU jumping to the ACC. I guess we misvalued the ACC in the regular season. I know that's been a topic for all college basketball analysts, is like, we thought it was really bad, and here they had a magical postseason yet again. And now next year they get Stanford, Cal, and SMU. I was surprised that SMU was able to get Enfield. I mean, I know they have a lot of resources, but so does USC. So that was shocking to me. And that's one that I will circle as an interesting team moving forward, especially because I still don't know how deep the ACC was. So they might be able to get wins. They are willing to spend. You mentioned Liberty. Well, SMU to me is similar to Liberty. They have a lot of money in football and basketball that they will throw in. That's one. Obviously, I think St. Louis hiring Josh Schertz. You saw the run at Indiana State. It'll be interesting to see what they do in the portal. But yeah, I'm constantly paying attention to all that stuff. I don't know if there's other ones off the top of my head. I mean, Patino year 2 at St. John's, I think would be one that I would circle, as I just feel like I would almost guarantee that they make the tournament next year, because I just feel like year 2, he's going to go out in the portal and bring in some players, recruit some players. And I think they're going to be very strong next year.
Yep, absolutely. And heck, I would have loved to have seen them in instead of Virginia this year as well. So they're going to be out for blood on that front as well. And I'm so glad that you brought up the ACC and their big run, because there weren't any bigger winners in the NCAA tournament than the ACC as a whole. A much maligned conference that there were people out there that were thinking that might be a 2 to 3 bid league. And then there they were with their 10 seed in their conference tournament, making it all the way to the Final Four. But how much can we utilize that to our advantage? Because I do take a look at a lot of these overreactions that we see in the offseason. Typically, it's with teams that make these Cinderella runs during the NCAA tournament, like a Florida Atlantic, for example, from last year. And I always love to be able to bet against some of those conferences, some of those teams that get hot in March, because typically typically it's not representative of what we saw from them throughout the entirety of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could throw the Miami Hurricanes into that mix this year.
Yeah.
We kind of thought that they turned a corner, and here they are. They missed out in the NCAA tournament, really had a terrible year. But, I mean, at the same time, I do think there's something to it. My brother is a diehard Duke fan, and he constantly reminds me, and sometimes the stats do impress me, that they've had more teams in the Final Four over the past 10 years than the SEC has in football with the 4-team playoff. There's something that they do incredibly well. I don't know how. I want to do like a deep dive on it, because other than Carolina and Duke and I guess Virginia, where Tony Bennett is such a great coach, even though I know we just shaded them, they were a bad team this year, in my opinion. They were a bad, good team, if that makes sense. But the runs by Miami and NC State have been shocking to me. And we saw Florida State go to the Elite Eight, too, with Leonard Hamilton not that long ago. It's weird. You watch the regular season, and these teams don't look that good. And then they make the tournament, and they're capable of making these magical runs because they do have talented rosters. I guess I'll say that. NC State, it's never like I watched them and said they didn't have any talent. It's just I didn't think they were capable of beating good teams consistently. And they did. And I guess Miami with Jimmy Larinaga, I guess I trusted Miami a little bit more, but there's something to it. But I do look to fade NC State next year. I really do. I am very curious. I mean, I think it's stupid that SMU and Cal and Stanford are in the ACC in general. I think most people do. It just doesn't make sense, but I am curious how those three schools will do. Stanford went out and got Kyle Smith, and I do think Mark Madsen is building Cal the right way. And then for SMU to hit the home run they did, in my opinion, it's going to be interesting to see the ACC in this gigantic form of a conference next year. Also, Micah Shrewsbury, year 2, and if Capel can continue to have Pitt, playing competitively. Earl Grant has gotten Boston College, I think, to a better level than they previously were. It's going to be interesting for next year. But, yeah, I do look to fade NC State. I'd be curious, though. What team would you trust most coming into next year between Cal, Stanford, and SMU?
Man, that is a tough one. I'd probably personally go with Stanford just because I do think that with Stanford, they are going to be able to land quite a few guys. I wouldn't doubt it if there are a few guys that stay with Kyle Smith. So I'd be looking at Stanford probably number 1. I think Cal just still needs another year, although I think that they've got the most upside of those three teams, and that's with SMU having a big NIL bag, and they're going to throw a lot of money at a lot of guys. I think it's going to once again take them just a little bit of time as well, though. Fertile grounds out there in the great state of Texas, and there's fertility when it comes to this, Colby, as Colby Dant, who does great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, is joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. Got to get you out with asking for your thoughts on John Calipari joining the Arkansas Razorbacks as their newest head coach and the seismic shift this is going to cause in college basketball.
I think it's fantastic, personally, because it makes, especially with him going to an SEC school, it makes that game must-watch next year in the years coming forward. Not even next year, moving forward. Jerome Tang had turned him down. All of a sudden, Arkansas was looking kind of bleak. I think multiple coaches turned him down. For them to go out there and get Calipari, who was once the hottest name, and I heard he had connections, because remember, Memphis, when he was at Memphis, if you've been to Memphis, Tennessee, it's like a 2-minute drive into Arkansas. Not Fayetteville, but into the state of Arkansas. So I heard he has connections potentially with, Tyson Chicken and stuff there for some NIL money. You give Calipari money, you never know. Now, I do believe he's going to have to change his philosophy. You got to add more transfers. Coaching matters more than ever. Before, you could just out-recruit teams, and I don't know how much in-game coaching mattered as much. I mean, it did, but Calipari, to me, is one that gets out-coached a lot in recent college basketball. That'll be fascinating to watch, but I think if you're an Arkansas fan, you're thinking, heck yeah. If you're a Kentucky fan, I think you're thinking, heck yeah. But the question is where do they turn? Is it Bruce Pearl? Is it Nate Oates? Do they land Billy Donovan? I don't know. Fascinating for the sport, and I can't wait to see what's next, and I can't wait to watch Kentucky and Arkansas play next year.
And for Kentucky, it could be a question of you don't know what you have until it's gone as well, but we're always glad to have you aboard, Kobe. Let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people are able to follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. Always a pleasure, man. And anytime, I'd love to come back. I'm at the Colby D on Twitter. I host the College Basketball Experience and the College Football Experience, as well as a bunch of other shows at the Sports Gambling Podcast and the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. So check us out. And yeah, always a pleasure, Greg. And thank you so much for having me.
Always great to be able to get Kobe aboard. Such a wealth of knowledge on this great game of college basketball. So big thanks to Kobe of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network for joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. if you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at Junin_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is via an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. Then from there, you are able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. We are going to be in off-season mode starting on the podcast tomorrow, looking at the transfer portal, looking at these coaching hires. This is a podcast that, even though the Nets have now been cut down in Arizona, is going to be going on every single day. So we've got you guys all covered there. We're going to be having guests on all throughout the off-season. Starting up in, I would say about June is typically when I start these up. I'll give you guys a conference preview podcast for all 32 conferences. So do not be a stranger. I'm going to be with you guys every single day throughout the offseason, because when it comes to taking a look at 362 Division I teams, might be one or two more or less next season, as we've got teams that go up/down to the D2 level. We've got you guys all covered there, and we need to spend as much time as humanly possible to be able to prepare for the next season to try to make the 2024-25 season our most profitable season ever. So appreciate all of you guys that have been along for this wild ride of a 2023-24 season. Has been a pleasure coming at you guys every single day throughout the regular season. I'll be back with you guys once again tomorrow and every single day throughout the off season. This podcast will always be here for you. So if you decide to listen in every day, I appreciate it. If you're in once in a while, hey, appreciate that as well. And if you're going to be on hiatus until November, we'll be here with you with open arms. So appreciate tuning in every single time you do, and I'll be with you guys every single day. So thank you.
If your job at a healthcare facility includes disinfecting against viruses, you know prevention is the best medicine, and maintaining healthy spaces starts with a healthy cleaning routine. Grainger's world-class supply chain helps ensure you have the quality products you need when you need them, from disinfectants and cleaning supplies to personal protective equipment, so you can help deliver a clean bill of health. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.